morning, everyone, and welcome to the Stewardship in Uncertain Times follow-up conversation led by Mike Ward. I'm Michelle Burmeister with Siebert Lutheran Foundation, and we are pleased to offer this series of workshops that are intended to equip you with new tools to navigate relationship building and fundraising during the COVID-19 pandemic. If you were unable to attend the first Stewardship in Uncertain Times workshop in the beginning of April, the recording is available on siebertfoundation.org on the Learning Events page. And today's workshop will also be recorded, and we'll have that on the website for your reference either later today or tomorrow. And we have another workshop with Mike scheduled for next Tuesday, May 5th at 10 a.m. Central Time, called Raising Money After the Pandemic, How to Restore Your Organization to Health. So he'll talk about planning for that time that is going to come eventually after the pandemic. And you can register for that on the Learning Events page as well. In the last month, Siebert has been witness to a variety of creative and wonderful ways churches, ministries, schools, and nonprofits are continuously adapting, serving others, and reaching people with the gospel. There are still so many unknowns in this situation, but we are seeing people allow God to work through them in new ways while moving forward in spite of these unknowns. And so thank you for your tireless work. We know it's been a lot, and we know it's not easy. But you give us so much hope, and the Siebert team is praying for you. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Mike. Mike, thank you so much for being here again with us today. We look forward to another great workshop, and will you please start by leading us in prayer?
I will. Thank you very much, Michelle. The Lord be with you. Dear and gracious God, we give you thanks for this day and this opportunity to gather, even through Zoom. We appreciate these opportunities that Siebert is providing to work with one another to discern how it is you're calling us to lead in days like this. Bless us, bless those we love, bless our country as we battle this pandemic, that we may return to wholeness and health, and just guide us in these days, that we may listen to your voice and go where you are leading us. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So thank you all for joining. I'm going to share my screen for a good portion of the early section of this, and then we'll open it up. We'll have, for those of you that were on the similar call before, there's going to be a lot more time for questions and dialogue, and so I've got a little bit of presentation, just kind of some updates and some reinforcement of some key concepts. But then I want to make sure we're dialoguing and responding to what it is that is on top of mind for you. I'm going to do my best to keep people muted. If you all will try to do that for yourselves as well, it does just. I just found my mute all button. Good. So use the mute all button. Doesn't mean I don't want to hear from you. Please feel free to use the chat to get my attention, or the raise hand function. And I, of course, will open it up and have conversation. But I'm going to lead us off just with a few things that I have. And again, I'm delighted. Thank you for joining in this. So continuing to call this Stewardship in Uncertain Times, because I do believe they are still uncertain times. But I certainly don't believe they're times that don't have opportunity. And don't have opportunity for new levels of mission and new opportunities for us to expand our mission. And so it's uncertain, but it's not hopeless by any means. My blog site, I'll post this again and I'll put it in the chat box. We continue as a firm to push out some material as new things come up. I just did a piece on starting a new call or starting your first call in a time of pandemic. Just so if you want to look to those resources, I commend them to you as ways to kind of keep current on some of our thinking. And just so you know, our firm, we meet every Friday during this time to kind of discuss what's happening, what's next. What do we need to adapt to in these days? We meet for at least an hour and a half every Friday morning to do that. So the newest trends that we're seeing is that we're far enough into this that we have a few folks we're walking with who have launched special appeals. Those special appeals can be some modest appeals for outreach, to some more than just a little bit modest appeals for aligning with vision. Now, notice I'm not saying full-blown capital campaign yet, although we have some opinion on capital campaign. I don't know that it's the time to launch. I do think if one was underway, it's not a bad time to continue that. But these are special appeals. So it's like an outreach appeal for a food pantry nearby. But just this week, one of the folks I'm working with launched a $100,000 appeal that beautifully aligns with the strategic plan that they had just adopted earlier this winter, to take that to the next level. As we just did some work with their council, none of their top 10 donors are currently on the council. One council member offered a gift of $4,500 and two offered gifts of $2,000 over and above their offering to implement this. And as we kind of built a gift chart, those gifts aligned with exactly what we needed in order to reach the $100,000. So we're fully confident we'll reach that $100,000 goal for this congregation. So this time doesn't mean that sort of thing can't happen. So I think easier are those special appeals for like a local ministry, like your food pantry, that has direct relationship to people in your community who are hurting. Or if there's something in the congregation that you need. I've also got an example where a congregation has launched a special appeal to just improve their technology capacities to improve the quality of their virtual worship. That's certainly a relevant topic for today. Then the other thing we're seeing, which has been a little bit of I don't know, I was surprised by it. I'll just leave it at that. I've had two organizations launch contracts with us to start strategic planning, and I had another conversation about that this morning. That there is a hunger to start to look at what is God calling us to in this, and how do we make sure that what we do next aligns with who we are, and how we would implement that. I've been doing some strategic planning already in this, and I have to tell you, the people who have been involved in that, it is very refreshing to think beyond the church of today to imagine what God is calling to in the future. And so we are certainly seeing that desire to get into strategic planning is increasing. The congregations that walk with us in the program called Stewardship for All Seasons, in Southern Ohio, last week I had 3 of those congregations express a desire for our unit on strategic planning because they wanted to get into that over the summer, and also felt that this year over the summer, they weren't going to lose people like they often do, just because of travel restrictions and those sorts of things. So we are seeing people start to look to strategic planning for a summertime activity, and a definite desire to engage in that. So I shared a little bit of this the last time, but I think this is just kind of really guided us in the place where we're at. There have been 5 recessions since 1980, and Protestants have increased their giving percentage in each of those. Not necessarily the total dollars each person gives, but if somebody was giving 2%, oftentimes they will then be giving 3 or 4% or even 5% on the other side of a recession, because it's in times that we see our neighbor in need that we're more interested and willing to make gifts. So in a recession or in a crisis time like we are in now, we see an initial positive response. And it's really critical that in this time that we are telling impact stories, that we're telling the stories of generosity, that we're telling the stories that help people to see just how relevant our ministries are. And so this initial positive response is really critical, that we let people know our ministry is making an impact, and we let people know that there are folks involved in our ministries who are stepping up their generosity. And if you need help with that, on my blog, there is a video on communication, and it talks specifically about those topics. Because the reason we want to do this is in this time, people are willing to free up some more money to give away because they see their neighbor in need. They know that some people aren't going to be able to give as much to the church, and so they step up now. there will be a decline in most recessions. There'll be a decline in giving. Fortunately, the church is the last to experience this decline. And the better we do in this initial phase of telling those stories of impact and telling those stories of generosity, the more likely that generosity is to continue into the second phase and really mitigate this phase. And in many churches, you won't experience this. But it's dependent on what we do right now with telling our stories of generosity and impact. And this is a growth area for most congregations. Most congregations don't tell these stories well. They keep giving a secret, and they don't talk in motivational terms about the impact we have. We tend to share the information that we fed people. We don't share the inspiration of what that meant to the person that was fed. Later, I expect that decline to begin to creep in probably over the next month. I could be wrong. We're evaluating that every week, and probably last into the fall. But then late fall, I expect to see the surge where it's usually led by our major donors, where they try to help take our organizations to a new level of service. And that's why I think strategic plan is also gaining some favor right now. And so we'll see that surge, and then we'll settle into a new normal in giving. Now, this could last longer. It could be shorter. We don't know the exact timeframes for each of these steps. But what we do know is the better we do during this initial phase, the better we'll experience all of the other phases of this pandemic. Communication, again, it's just critical. We've got to make sure we're communicating well. We're communicating the impact and outcome. We're not telling people how busy we are. We're telling people the difference the ministry we're doing is making in people's lives. We like for your communication to have a crisis plan, and I like that crisis communication plan to be that only the pastor and the council president are the people speaking on behalf of the congregation. We don't need to accidentally scare people into scarcity. We need to make sure that we are telling the right stories, telling the stories in the right way, so that the message, we need to just control our message a little bit better now. And that message needs to be a join me or a join us message. We don't need to tell other people that they should be more generous. We need to invite them to join us in that generosity. Too often in the church, the finance team will send out the letter that says, hey, giving's down, you all ought to give. It's a terrible letter to send. The letter ought to be, there's great generosity here. I'm personally going to give more. I'm going to tithe my stimulus check or whatever it might be. Will you join me in that generosity? That type of communication is critical. How and when is also important. I think it's just critical these days that we're emailing people, our website is up to date, and we're still using direct mail. Direct mail was not dead before the pandemic. In fact, everything I'm hearing is that people are engaging direct mail even more in these days. And so we need to continue, I think, a monthly letter that tells outcomes of an impact of our ministry, along with an envelope for people to send their check back, is still a great tool to use. It's not wasted postage. I think it's just really critical that we do that. So the next priority activity that I recommend, if you've not already checked in on your top 10 donors, I highly recommend doing that. I addressed that in the last session we did with Siebert, of having a care call with your top 10 donors, and then just inviting them, asking them what this is going to mean for their giving. Because our top 10 donors are probably giving between 20 and 60% of the revenue for our congregations. Their giving matters a lot to how we're going to end up doing. But now we're a day away from being at a point where we can do some good analysis, where we can look and see who are the donors in our congregations that have not given between March 15th and April 30th. That's a good sample set period of time to see how people are financially responding during this time. So what I really want to know is I want to have a list of the people who haven't given during that date range. And I want them in descending order, with the highest donor on top, lowest donor on the bottom, of donors who have not given from March 15th to April 30th, because for most of us, that's the period of time that we've been out of face-to-face worship. And then I want to develop, I don't know what to do until I see the list. If the list is only smaller donors, then what that's telling us is we're either not engaging them or we're not reaching them in a way that they are, wanting to respond financially. Oftentimes our lower donors are the ones who will put in cash or a check in the offering plate when they're present, but they miss Sundays that they're not present. It could be that this group of people needs a text to give option during the worship service when they're engaging it virtually. Again, I don't know exactly how to respond until I see this list. If 4 of our top 10 donors are on this list, I really need to pay attention with some more personal follow-up. Now, we also need to be careful. Some of our donors only give once a year or once a quarter. And so when we see them on this list, we then need to look at their other patterns of giving. If their pattern for giving is they only write 1 check every December, then it's not that big a deal that they've missed giving March 15th to April 30th. But if they're a person who gives every week and all of a sudden we've missed all of their gifts in this period of time, we need to address that. We need to create strategy, and it's not going to necessarily be the same strategy to each person, because not every donor is going to respond in the same way. So develop strategy based on your donors who haven't given in that period of time. And then we need a thank you strategy. We need to increase the ways in which we say thank you to people who are stepping up in this time. I heard from a congregation the other day where one donor said, you know what, I feel like it's probably going to be a lean time. I'm going to do my entire year's giving this month so that we don't have any cash flow issues here at the congregation. Well, tell that story. Like, if you've had a similar story, let that story be known. If you had a donor that doubled their giving from $20 a month to $40 a month, tell that story. You don't have to out the person by name, but tell their story so that people can be inspired by their generosity so that they too can be more generous to the ministry. Then I think we need to be a little bit more astute at looking around us. I don't believe this is the time where we only focus on the survival of our congregation. I think this is a time where we look for monthly partners who we can bless with additional giving as folks are generous through our ministries. We all have partner organizations. We all have outdoor ministries that kids go to for faith formation. We all have Lutheran colleges that, or other colleges affiliated with our denomination that people go to that help pass on faith even while educating. We all have judicatory bodies that are supporting our ministries and helping to sustain us. Every community has a food pantry. There are places that we need to have thrive during this time and not just focus on congregational survival. And so what I'd love to see is that each month we declare that any money we get in that we don't need this month, we're going to give away to a ministry partner. Name that ministry partner at the beginning of the month. Let people know that if revenue exceeds expenses in the month of May, we're going to help bless our outdoor ministry, our camp partner, because they're having a tough year, because certainly camp numbers will be down, if not altogether gone for this year. We need to be about more than just our own survival. And I think instead of waiting till the end of the year to give away what's left over, I think we encourage that every month we have some left over that we can give away. Because these are not the days that need to be about developing our reserves. These are days that need to be about impacting ministry. We need to be telling our outcome and generosity stories. I think that needs to happen during worship time. And I would do that during the offering. And that would be the least of the ways in which I would tell those stories. But we need to be about those stories. Finally, quarterly reminders and thank yous, telling our stories of impact, being a little bit more personal. Don't just send transactional receipts. Call a donor a day and let them know that you're thinking about them, praying for them, and that their gifts to the ministry make a difference. I'm going to quickly stop sharing my screen here just to make sure I got a couple more people to admit to the meeting. But just to, it just won't be on your screen as I kind of finish this up. But if you haven't sent quarterly thank yous yet, don't have that be just a transactional receipt. Make that be about a personal letter that includes outcome stories that the congregational ministry is making a difference. And if you don't know what those outcome stories are, the next time you see anybody in your congregation, ask the question, or next time you have a council meeting, ask the question, how have you seen God at work in the midst of this congregation over these last weeks? Your people are more capable of telling these stories now because our congregational ministries are having such a bigger impact on people now. And so ask that question, get those stories and share them. If you don't know what the stories of generosity are, talk to your financial people who aren't sharing this information and tell them anytime a gift comes in out of the ordinary, you need to be alerted to that. And if you've got a secrecy culture where you're not allowed to know, it's time to break through that. But until you do, say, I just need to know people who have changed their generosity so that I can call them, I can thank them, and I can be present in their lives. I have heard of many ministries getting gifts from people who aren't even members because they're engaging your worship online. They might not even live in your state, but they choose to send a gift. If somebody does that, thank them. Pick up the phone and call them and let them know that their gift is appreciated, and ask the question, why did you choose to make a gift to us? You're going to get an outcome story. You're going to get a generosity story from that, and you're going to have a chance to touch and engage somebody's life. And I think that's kind of part of our mission and what we're about. And so seize that opportunity. Don't let a first-time donor come to your congregation organization and be ignored. Because a first-time donor that gets ignored will not be a second-time donor, and you've lost the chance to impact their life. Treat them like the person that they are. Pick up the phone. It'll be the best thing you do all day, I promise you, by having that conversation. And by the way, when I was a development director for the camps here in the Southeast US, I love donor visits. I hated making phone calls. I tell you what, making phone calls in the environment we're living in right now is actually fun because people want to talk to you. And so pick up the phone and have a conversation. It's delightful. I almost wish I was a development officer again, just getting to call donors, because I'm doing a feasibility study right now, and everybody is just so eager to talk to me. It's just a great environment to be picking up the phone and talking to folks. So actually, I talked more than I expected to here to begin this. So let's open this up now to your questions and figure out what your concerns are, what you need to be talking about. How can I be helpful? You should be. Is anybody having trouble unmuting themselves? The capacity should be there to unmute yourself.
I'm Mary Martha Canis. I serve as pastor of a church on the north side of Milwaukee. I really appreciate the focus on generosity. I mean, we focus on God's generosity instead of on scarcity in this time. We are a congregation where most of our members do not have checkbooks, and they give cash as they're able to, living with material poverty. And we're delivering diapers to them in a safe mode right now. So as we consider that, we're actually using the offering time in our YouTube worship videos to remind people to stay in and to say, this is the time normally when our acolytes will be passing the offering plate. Put a bowl or a dish or a Tupperware container in your home for this time. We don't want you trying to come out to the church's mailbox to put your offering in there, but we do want you to keep, all of us have something to offer. Keep making your offering. Don't be discouraged if it's not what you thought it would be, given the current reality, and know that God is generous and will bless all these offerings when we can gather them all together. So that's been our approach right now.
I think that's great. Do you have ministry partners beyond your congregation?
Tons of them, and we have done already did a partner update.
Okay.
Do personal letters to everyone who sends something. We are in the midst of preparing a video that will go to all of our partner donors, thanking them, showing some faces of lives touched and cared for, and then emphasizing also that it's our call to remain generous. We just shared masks with 2 different homeless ministries who use our building. They can't be inside right now, but there's still things that we can do to serve. Some of our members are making masks. They don't have money to give right now.
Right.
They can make masks.
Yeah. Have you done anything since this started with any crowdfunding kind of activity?
We have not done any crowdfunding.
So that seems to be like, if one of your, like if a ministry partner is another congregation, can you develop a site that says, hey, Our Savior's Lutheran Church, we'd like to help, I don't know the name of your ministry.
Heffeth Lutheran, unusual name, that's all right.
No, I've heard of that because I do enough work in Greater Milwaukee, but we want to help Heffeth. We have a $500 goal to help them. Would you make a gift? And so to get people to offer their 20, their 50, their $100, and actually my congregation had a $750 goal with that for our food pantry, and we raised $4,500. So I think if your ministry partners would be willing to allow you to be that extra, and if there's a way that you could create a crowdfunding page. I mean, you can use GoFundMe. It's not my favorite, but you know, if I think Vanco, who do you use for your giving? Oh, actually, I can direct you. Give Lively. Have you ever heard of Give Lively?
No, I'll look into it. Thank you.
Give Lively can create a personal fundraising page. And so what Our Savior's Lutheran would do is they'd create a personal fundraising page on your behalf. And then they would put that out to their members to say, we'd love to raise $1,000 today for them. Would you make an extra gift? Because here's the impact they're having. And I think with where you sit in partnership with them, it's a great way for them to get some generosity stories for their members looking outside their walls to support that impactful ministry that you're having. And it's then also a way for you to develop some outside resource to help sustain your ministry. That's the way I would recommend. And Mary Martha, feel free to contact me offline from this call to talk further about that.
Thanks for that input. And our partners have been generous before we've asked. It's been an amazing experience. I'll let someone else speak. It's been incredible.
Okay, thanks. Other questions, comments, concerns? So it wasn't that thorough of a presentation. I said this last time, which was even a more thorough presentation. So this is, let's chat. Don't be afraid of Zoom. Or type it in the chat box, and if you don't want to speak, type your question in the chat box. But the value of this time is going to be responding to your questions, concerns.
Hey, Mike, I'll jump in. This is Preston Hoffman with Lutheran High School Association. Just a question. First off, thanks for this. It's pretty interesting and helpful. But I'm curious about, you had like the mention of text to give during events. And I've been sort of curious about this text to give option. We've not really utilized it as yet. But I'm curious, like what kind of feedback you get from that, or maybe even anybody else in the group here that's tried it, and do you find it successful? Do you get, what sort of reaction do you get from donors to it? Can you give me any feedback on that?
Sure. So text to give has a place within the overall fundraising function of every organization. It's not the place where I want my major donors doing their giving. I want my major donors doing their giving by, well, I want them gifting stock, right? You know, so text to give isn't my only method for getting gifts. Text to give can be a great place for at an activity, like if you're having a virtual community gathering, it's a great way to make that spontaneous gift that would be, you know, for many a first time gift. For many, it's just that gift at the time of kind of thing. In a congregational setting, I don't want text to give to take away from the people that have set up automatic bank drafts. But the place for text to give is for those $20 and $40 and $10 gifts that can make a difference over time and can bring a donor in the door. Again, first time, especially in a high school setting, you need to be paying attention to those first time donors. And so you may have the capacity to get somebody in the door as a $10 donor, and you can grow them to a $1,000 donor as they work through the pipeline. So that's kind of the place for it. Donors like it from a convenience standpoint. So if it's housed within a worship service, it's a quick way to give. But again, I want it for that extra gift. Or if, you know, I don't know exactly what you do, but if you've got your alumni association gathered, it can be a quick way to say, hey, we need to close a gap on this scholarship. You know, I need $1,000 tonight. You know, it's a quick way to energize. And I brought it up in the congregational context because my hunch is when we do this analysis, we're going to be missing a lot of our smaller donors. And so to do it there, that Give Lively I talked about is something that we offer and suggest people look into. The We Raise Foundation is another place that you can get that. Their fee is a little bit high for it, in my opinion, but it's a good system that they have. And actually, Vanco and Tithely both also have text to give option. Give Lively and We Raise also has that crowdfunding option, which actually, as a high school, everything I just shared with Mary Martha should apply to you.
Sure.
Probably.
Yeah.
You know, to get some crowdfunding from some of your congregational partners and other partners, because a lot of congregations aren't going to be gifting money out of their budgets this year. But what I hope is that congregations will be opening up to their members to do direct support to people like you that they should care about, because you've had this ongoing relationship, and we want to make sure you're still here, you know, in the fall.
Sure.
So was that helpful?
Yeah, very helpful. Thanks.
Great. Other questions? So if there aren't any other questions, I'm going to just start calling on you to tell me how great it's going, because you don't have any questions, so it must be going awesome in your context. So.
I'll speak. I missed most of the presentation. I wasn't let into the meeting until just recently. So I'm looking forward to viewing or listening to this. And thank you, Mike. I was in on a couple of others and have really enjoyed listening to what you have to offer. I'm from Camp Luther in Three Lakes, Wisconsin, which is north. We do year-round camp. Our biggest income is our summer camps, obviously. As of right now, no income is coming in as far as revenue that way. Our donors have been very generous, even just in the month of April. So we're very thankful for that. We have, when all of this started, we sent out an informational letter. Nothing panicky, but just like, this is the reality, things have stopped happening here, and gifts started just coming in. And I think people are just moved because they understand that nonprofits are in a situation that's difficult anyway. We are in the midst of a campaign towards the end of a building campaign, which is being built.
Okay.
So we have people who've made commitments, people who have fulfilled commitments, and then our donors that usually give the major gifts, and also our other donors that just give faithfully. So our plan, we've sent out letters letting, or emails actually, to our major donors, just giving them updates of what's been happening. So every week, our executive director, we've constructed very carefully messages that are positive but very realistic. So our hope is to go into the year 2021 without debt. And so our worst case scenario would be no more donations other than some support we get from our district, and a little bit of revenue through our canteen sales online. So we're constructing 4 different groups of letters, segmenting our donors who still have a commitment, asking them to extend a commitment 1 year and give all of their gift this year to the general fund. The second group would be those who've already fulfilled their commitments, to consider giving a gift again this year. And many of those are also one-time major donor, once a year gift type of giving. So they'll be getting that letter asking them to just give it this time rather than at the end of the year. And then those 449 and under, we're just asking to give a gift and then probably appealing to them again in the fall if we well, I think we'll need to. So, and we've done online through mainly Facebook giving with a button, you know, on different posts and things, and that's been okay, not super big. I haven't done the group funding, so, but that's what we're doing. I mean, I have a lot of faith in the Lord that no matter, all we can do is share the opportunities for people to give to camp at this time. Be real about where we're at. And we did get the PPP loan, and our staff went on furlough for a month, alternating furloughs. So we're trying really hard to make those finances keep going into the future. So with gifts that came in this month, we're able to work through the month of June, or maybe it's July now. But we still haven't made a decision about canceling camp, that we're waiting on different recommendations by the state and the county and the nation. They're not giving us a lot of information, but we want to keep everybody as safe as possible, and then looking at how do we run camp if we can't run a normal residence camp. So right. It's been an interesting time.
Yeah, so a couple of responses. I think it's a good proactive move you're making. First off, though, I have to say I hate Facebook giving.
Okay, I wrote that down already.
Yeah, it's like 90 days from the time somebody makes a gift till the time you get your check. So I would do everything but Facebook giving, probably. I think you're doing the right steps. I hope there's also a lot of personal touch with phone calls to your donors. And hopefully that before those letters go, there can be a little bit of a groundswell starting to form, where you've got a couple of donors able to say, hey, even though I finished my commitment to this building, I don't want to leave Camp Luther in debt. I'm going to extend my gift through this time because, you know, it's not their fault the pandemic hit, you know? Right. And so if you can have people making that statement that the letter doesn't ask people to do what there's not a lot of people already saying they're going to do, and you're going to get that through the phone calls. Okay. I read a blog post from somebody that I think this is a true story. They made a phone call, didn't even ask, and the person sent them $50,000 just because they checked in and they talked about the mission and what was going on. So I think that join me, that join us culture in that giving is going to be critical. So, and again,
go ahead. Sorry, Mike.
I was just going to say, I'd be happy to talk to you more about specifics if you want to reach out to me after we're done here. I think I'd be happy to. I have an upper background. I'd be happy to talk to you about that. So. Okay,
great. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put my email address up in the chat box here, just to make sure people know how to reach me when I offer that kind of thing. Again, I'm happy to follow up with people. It's all the time I used to spend on airplanes, I spend just talking to people now. So other questions, comments, concerns? Anybody doing so well they just got money to give away from their organization now? You can share with one of the others on the call. Well, somebody's got to have something. Again, I wasn't that thorough. Well, then everybody needs to type in the chat that this was great. Or
I wanna tell you what I've been doing, which is I saw it on a commercial for a development management system, and I thought, well, we can't afford to purchase that, but I can still do what they were doing within there. But I've been in contacting people, not being able to get a hold of them, and if I know it's their cell number, I've just been sending text videos to them, letting them know we're thinking about them and praying for them. And some of the responses have been just really wonderful. And then also doing that with the donors that get tired of me calling
Okay.
or just something different, and it's a visual. So it's been pretty easy to do. So, and fun for me.
Okay, good, thanks. Really, no more questions? There's got to be a question. All right, so respond in the chat box to this question. Giving through March exceeded expenses or was less than expenses? Which one? March was a long time ago, I know, but that was the first couple of weeks of the pandemic. Did the giving you got during March? Okay, so one was less, the other exceeded. Okay. So if it was less, I highly encourage you to find that's where, if it was less, that's where you need to start getting those generosity stories and to begin sharing those generosity stories to encourage other generosity. And if it was less, that's where this analysis I talked about from that March 15th through April 30th timeframe, you can go ahead and do it today, I don't care. Because not that many people are going to give to you between today and tomorrow for the end of the month. But that what I talked about with that analysis of giving from mid-March through the end of April, and who the donors are that have been absent in their giving in that period, and discerning the way in which you approach them is just absolutely critical. So if you came into the meeting after that was talked about, grab the recording and look at that. Analysis has to happen now, because if you get too far behind, it's going to be harder and harder to make up for it. And if that information isn't shared with the pastor, it's time to work through that. And we've got to get to the point where we're able to lead the organization because we know what's happening from a financial perspective. Just having the finance team know that we're behind isn't helpful in changing the situation. And so we've got to get to the point where the information is shared with the pastor on a donor by donor basis so that we can create strategy, because not everybody's the same. My giving is actually up over what it was last year. I give monthly regularly, and I've made several additional gifts to both my church and to the camp that I dearly love, because I'm worried about the camp that I dearly love in times like this. So don't send me a message that says giving was behind, and I got that message. But my giving isn't behind. So if you want me to be more generous, don't talk about giving being behind from everybody else in the congregation. Talk to me about, thank you for my generosity. Here's another way, and maybe which we could lead people. But by keeping that information, I'm really getting more and more frustrated with organizations that keep that information a secret from the leaders of the organization. So if you need more on that, you can email me. And I've got a chapter on that in my book, published by Fortress Press. It's called Abundance, Creating a Culture of Generosity. We'll never create a culture of generosity if we keep giving information a secret. I believe 100% though, in that information being kept confidential, but I tend to trust pastors with confidential information. So, yeah. Yep. And certainly, so one other thing I'm sort of, we've talked about a little bit, as organizations cut, because, well, you're a camp not having a program, you're going to have to cut something. We need to make sure that the story isn't one that we're doing we're going to end up having less impact. But we need to make sure our story is one, we're being good stewards, but there's still reason to be generous here, because we've got a vision for the way in which we're going to impact the future. Even in times like this, people want to give to organizations that have a strong vision as to how they're going to advance the kingdom of God into the future. And so, you know, trying to have an abundance mentality here in the midst of this, I know it can be hard, but it is what people ultimately are looking for. Our ships aren't sinking. We need to be paying really good attention. But I believe people still want to be very generous to make sure that good ministry happens. And again, that's where we have to tell our generosity stories, and that's where we have to tell our stories of impact. And if we're not doing that, people are going to pick other things to do with their money. So, good. Another call for questions, or we can go ahead and wrap up, but what else? Anything? Wow, you're the quietest group I've interacted with in a long time. So, well, folks, I'm delighted that you joined me today. Next week, the workshop is going to be geared towards preparing for if you need to do a special appeal to close the gap. I'm not saying it's time for you to launch that special appeal. It could be. I'm thinking, though, the preparation time begins now for something that might happen a little later, once you kind of know where things are. So that's what next week's going to be about, is kind of how to pull that together, how to engage your volunteers. Boy, a few more generosity stories. You know, I still love the one of the person who doubled their giving for the month of April. They didn't know what they could do in the future because they were worried about the future, but what they knew today was that they could double their giving for the month of April, so that's what they were going to do. You know, I had a pastor get a call in the morning and somebody offered $200 for the discretionary fund. And that afternoon, another member called and said, here's $2,000 for your discretionary fund. I know people are in need and people are hurting. The key there, if you ever want more money to that discretionary fund, is then to tell people what you did with it the first time, that it had an impact, that it's not still just sitting in your checkbook, but that it is being deployed to make a difference in people's lives. People want to make a difference, and when you give them that opportunity, that'll happen. Sarah, check my blog in a couple of days. I've had an idea for a new blog post on generosity stories. So your question inspires me to actually make that happen. So, all right. Well, folks, I'm delighted you joined me. I hope you found it helpful. For those of you that I was unable to, I was sharing my screen and it didn't give me access to release people from the waiting room. I apologize for that. I'll try and get that figured out for the next time. But this recording will be made available, and you'll be able to go back and catch what you might have missed at the beginning. But again, thanks for all you do. I know it's a tough time. It's making a difference, though. Keep at it. Take care.